In our previous video, we looked at a simple AI agent built with Java. One thing you may have noticed is it does not have any memory. It does not remember previous answers. Let's look at this example. List 7 wonders of the world. AI will probably list all the wonders. So let's say I want more details about one of the item. So I can ask like more details about item 2. I want more details about this item, Jordan. But AI says it does not know what is item number 2. It has no context of what we are referring to. It does not know what our previous answers were. So we need to enhance our project or application to provide this context to AI. Let's take a look how to do this. To provide context to our AI, we need to store the previous conversation, including messages and also AI response. We can store that in a database or in Redis or in memory, anything. For our example, we will be using Redis. So this is the implementation plan, the workflow for our project. We have a client, we have controller, memory service, which talks to Redis, and we have OpenAI service, which talks to OpenAI. Whenever we start a new chat, like say explain Docker is a message, we generate a new chat ID and we pass that chat ID and the message to OpenAI. It will then get the response back. Before returning the response, we store that conversation, both the message and AI response, into Redis. For subsequent chats, when we pass the chat ID along with the message, in this example, how does it differ from VM? We are referring to Docker by passing this ID from previous chat. In this case, we first get the conversation from the memory service, which in turn gets it from Redis, and we prepare that messages, including the new user message, and then pass the old message, previous message and the new message combined to AI. Then we will get the appropriate response. Again, before we return the response, we save that conversation to Redis. This is our plan. Now let's implement this in our project. Before implementing the code, we need to make sure we have Redis software installed. If you are on Linux, you could install it directly. If you are on Windows or Mac, you need to run it using Docker. This is the command to run Redis in Docker. Docker run and give a name, my Redis, and by default it runs on 6379 port. You can map the same port and run this Redis. Once the Redis server is up, you will see this message, ready to accept connections. That means Redis is set up properly and we are ready to write our code. Let's start by adding dependencies in our build.gradle file. We need dependency on Redis, and we also need Jackson data bind for object mapper to convert string to object and vice versa. Once we have these two dependency, we need to configure our Redis port number and localhost in resources, application properties. So we need two configurations. spring.data.redis.host as localhost and the port number 6379. This is our configuration. Now let's start implementation. So we need to store the conversation. So we need a Pojo class for conversation, and it is basically a list of messages. So we need a Pojo for storing the messages. We will call it as conversation message. We could have called it as chat message, but it will conflict with some names already present in OpenAI. So we'll call it as conversation message. A message will have two parts, as we know. There is a role and we also have a content. So role, we are defining role as a enum. You could always use string, but this is much more easier to manage. We have looked at two roles earlier, system and user. There is also something called assistant. So the response we receive from AI, that will be known as assistant messages. So we need to store the role and we need to store the content of the message. This is our Pojo for storing the conversation message. We will add required annotations. Next, we'll create conversation Pojo class. Conversation is basically just two fields. We need to have a chat ID. Then we will have the list of messages. That is our conversation message. For a new conversation, when you're creating fresh, this could be an empty array list. We'll set it as default array list. So we will add the annotations. Okay, so finally in the Pojo, we need to also add support for chat ID in chat request and chat response. In chat response, we will return the chat ID. Any new chat, we will generate the ID and pass it back. And in chat request, we add support for chat ID so that user can pass that ID to remember the previous messages. These are the changes for the Pojo. We need to now create a memory service which will store and fetch conversations from Redis. So we will create a service called conversation memory service, or you could have called it as just memory service. So we will need dependency on Redis here. So we'll say string Redis template. This is from our dependency that we already added. Let's build this project so that we have these dependencies added. Now let's import this class. We also need dependency on object mapper. To convert string to object and vice versa. So now let's add these two as constructor parameters. Next, we need to create two methods. One is to save the conversation and other one is to get the conversation. So we start with save conversation, which takes conversation as the input. Import this class. Now we will save the data to Redis. This is the code. Redis template dot ops for value dot set. This chat ID is the key and value is our object as a string. So let's make sure we throw the exception. Next, we need to create the method to get the conversion from Redis. To get, we need a chat ID. We will fetch the conversation, the record from Redis, and we need to return this method of return a conversation object. Now if this JSON is not empty, we need to convert that to a conversation object and return it back. Let's add that code. And this could also throw exception. And we need a constructor with only chat ID. Let's say public conversation string chat ID. Lombok by default adds the empty constructor, so we need this constructor. Next, let's change the chat service and the controller to use this memory. Let's start by chat service. In our chat service, we need to support for passing chat ID here. Once we have the chat ID, we will first fetch the conversation from the memory service. For that, we need dependency on the memory service. We will add it as a constructor parameter. Then we will fetch the conversation from the memory service for the chat ID. This could throw exception. Let's just pass it out. So we need to make this as annotate as service. Now, before we pass these messages to OpenAI, we need to use the messages available in our conversation that is coming from our memory. So let's remove the system messages for now. So conversation dot get messages dot add. The new message that we got from user, will add it to the list, existing list. It is basically a user message. This is what we will do first here. Next, we need to prepare the actual chat messages to pass to OpenAI. So we'll build that from our conversation messages now. Since we already added that message to this conversation message, stream.map. Now we'll create a new chat message. This is the OpenAI's chat message. We need to pass the role as a string in this case. And we will pass the message. Finally, we'll collect that as a list. This is a messages list that will contain previous messages and also a new user message. The previous message will also contain the AI responses. And we pass this to OpenAI as it is. Now, before we return the response, we need to save the response back to our conversation. So we will first save this response. We will add it back into our conversation messages. Add new conversation message, and the role is assistant in this case because this is the response we're getting back from AI. And this is the response. And we will save it back to our memory from our memory service. And finally, we can return the response. Now our service is ready. It has all the integrations with our memory service. Now finally, let's make changes to controller to auto-generate the ID if it is not present. So we need to get the ID from chat request only if it is not null. If it is not null, we will use that. If it is null, we will generate a new ID. We will use random UID. This is a condition. So we are generating a new ID if it is a new chat, or it will be a chat ID that user has passed. And we will pass this to the service and this could return an exception. Let's throw it back to the user. And finally, when we're returning the response, we need to also pass the chat ID along with the response. That's it. Let's now start the application and try it out. Let's start our Spring Boot application. Okay, the server is up. Now let's try it out from here. Let's start with listing the wonders. As expected, it will return a list. Now let's see, now the response has a chat ID. This is what will give us the memory. To ask further questions on the same context, we need to pass this chat ID in the request. Copy this and pass it as part of our request payload. Now if I ask questions related to this answer, can remember that. Let's say, give me more details about item 1. That is Great Wall of China. Earlier this would have said, I don't know what is item number 1. Now since we are passing chat ID, our agent is able to look up in the memory what is this about and pass that context to the OpenAI. So it is able to recollect it is related to Great Wall of China and provide you the answers. Let's look at another example, a new example, new chat. Suggest 3 top sci-fi movies. So it suggested Blade Runner, The Matrix and Arrival. Let's say I will ask who are the main characters in second movie. I am referring to Matrix and I need to pass the chat ID so that it remembers which context we are referring to. So it says the main characters in The Matrix. It knows we are referring to that second movie in that list. Now our AI has some context. What we are talking about, it knows what we are asking about because of the storage. That's it for this video. Maybe in next video we can have more use cases.